Sean is going to lead us in the topic of functional collaboration as futurology. And I understand that once he defines his terms clearly, those of you that brought tarot or crystals or any augury spells are going to be quite disappointed. Okay, we're going to be doing this empirically. So that's very good. But for those that do not have the joy of knowing Sean, who can I just acknowledge now has done so much work behind the scenes. So yes, thank you. Oops, going this way, Sean. And so it is. This is a special moment for you allowed to actually participate and lead us in this front and centre. So Sean is an adjunct researcher at the Swinburne Centre for Urban Transitions. He's over 40 years' experience in housing management, housing policy, and advocacy, and housing research. Undertaken a range of housing research projects in housing finance and rental systems, housing for older persons, housing cooperatives, local government housing strategies, and the private rental market. Now, anyone that is paying any attention to media at the moment in Australia simply knows that the repetition of the word housing there is that this is a question that of enormous significance for the Australian community. In 2014, he published a book, Making Progress in Housing, a framework for collaborative research that Philip McShane said was a new addition to the understanding of the functional specialities and functional collaboration. Significant praise. And in that book, he proposes that housing researchers adopt functional collaboration. So in June, he will be presenting on functional collaboration at the International Sociology Congress in Melbourne, but this afternoon, we have the joy of hearing from Sean now. So welcome, Sean, go the right way, and thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I know it's the end of a long day, but I wanted to really bring us back to, I suppose, what I think are some of the key themes of the conference. And I suppose I wanted to begin with an acknowledgement that last year was the 50th anniversary of the publication of Bernard Lonergan's Method in Theology. And there are some that would say that, and I think I'd be amongst those that would say that the key message in that hasn't really been taken up by the Lonergan community and more broadly. Anyway, here I'm going to talk about it again as I understand it. So Fred Crowe describes Bernard Lonergan as a theologian who sought to build the future and the functional specialties as relevant to any human studies that investigate a cultural past to guide its future. Now, it would appear that the first four functional specialties, research, interpretation, history, and dialectic, are about an understanding of the past, and that the second four, foundations, policies, systematics, and communications, are about looking to the future. I'm proposing here that all the functional specialties are in some way oriented to the future. So I'll begin with a brief overview of futurology and then talk about functional collaboration as futurology. So, futurology. The future is fascinating to us. We are oriented to the future and hope for a better one. We do things now in anticipation of the future, like learning a trade, education. We make sacrifices for future generations. We like to know what is going to happen so that we can take action to mitigate, alter, or avoid the future. Such is the perennial interest throughout history that we have turned to readers of the future, astrologers, soothsayers, fortune tellers, different forms of divination. We have a literary and movie tradition of utopias and dystopias. Cosmologists debate the future of our world, the sun, the stars, the universe. Are we headed for extinction? Is the universe headed for the big freeze, the big rip, or the big crunch? Each religious tradition, whether Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, or Judaism, has its view of the end times, the eschaton. In our tradition, we are familiar with the eschaton being described as the kingdom of God, the second coming of Christ, heaven, hell, the new heaven and the new earth, the coming of the Messiah, the resurrection of the dead, and the last judgment. Building upon the post-war focus on politics, planning and strategies, and given a major boost by developments in statistics, futurology has become a new academic discipline. UNESCO has even established a chair of future studies and regards futures literacy as an essential competency in the 21st century. Over the decades, futurologists have moved from predicting the future to mapping alternative futures to shaping desired futures. They work closely with organisations in particular, and they have a democratic bent and want to empower people to think about and realise alternate futures. Now, all these visions of the future are highly imaginative and speculative and rely heavily on the personal and cultural worldview. They are appealing. They arouse deep feelings within us. We can imagine the future in individual or in social terms. We can envision it in terms of reward or punishment. We can use it to control another person or a group. If you do this, you'll go to heaven. If you do that, you'll go to hell. We can envisage the future as full of terror or as being enveloped in love. Visions of the future change what we do and how we do it. Now, I'll talk about functional collaboration as futurology, but as a preliminary, I wanted to present you with an image. No doubt you're familiar with the parable of the sower from the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The sower went out to sow, sowed some seed. Some seed fell along the path, some along rocky ground, some among thorns, some on good soils and thrived. But here I want to put a new twist on the parable. Recently, I've been reading a fascinating book, The Age of Seeds, How Plants Hack Time and Why Our Future Depends on It. Fiona Macmillan-Webster describes the amazing characteristics of seeds. They grow in all sorts of environments. They are distributed by wind, animals, water, and even birds. Some have relatively short span, whereas others are long-lived. Some have short dormancy, while others wait long periods for the right environment. Some germinate with water, some require the right temperature and soil, others require smoke after bushfire. All you gardeners know how difficult it is to germinate seeds and cultivate trees, flowers, bushes, grasses, and fruits, of course. But imagine a seed, a sunflower seed. Do you know what it will grow into? Yes, under the right conditions, it will stun us with its bloom. The right conditions. With technology, with our know-how of sunflowers, we gardeners can ensure that the environment is just right to ensure success, the germination and growth of the sunflower. But let us think of the seed that is humanity. We've only been around a relatively very short time. What of us? What will we become? Unlike the sunflower seed, we do not know what we will become. Indeed, we are still working out the conditions that will promote our flourishing and development into this unknown reality. But how do we do it? How do we do this? How? Knowing how. In support of my contention that functional collaboration is futurology, I will begin with three preliminary comments and then talk about each functional specialty. First, functional collaboration incorporates all the demands of history. Descartes for a rigorous method, Bacon for empirical evidence, Hegel that philosophers not only account for their views but also account for contrary views, Marx that we not only interpret the world but change it. In this way, functional collaboration links theory and practice. Secondly, one of the unique characteristics of humanity is our capacity and ability to put in place the conditions necessary for the occurrence of certain events. So having worked out the environment that particular types of seeds need, the technology, the know-how, we put in place the conditions that will promote their growth. Functional collaboration is also a technology, one that underpins all other technologies. It is the knowing how in understanding, affirming, and deciding how to make progress in any area of human endeavour. As such, it is integral to the structure of both practical action and history. And thirdly, functional collaboration is a conditioned series of schemes of recurrence. As such, it is dynamically oriented to the future. Each functional specialty is not just for itself, each is providing the conditions for the occurrence of the next functional specialty. Each is leaning forward towards the next functional specialty, indeed, towards new ways of living. So let me illustrate this by briefly talking about each of the functional specialties. Functional specialty research. I've been talking about the future, but what are the data on the future? There is no data on the future. The data we have is the data on manifold events in time and place in our past and present. Our problem is twofold. On the one hand, the many variations in the data in different societies, cultures and religions, and on the other hand, a heuristic for selecting, organising and understanding the relevant data. All inquiries begin with some heuristic, however inadequate, with some understanding of what it is we are investigating. The functional specialty research, however, throws up time and place data which disrupts the current heuristic. In this way, the functional specialty research sets the conditions for the functional specialty interpretation. A heuristic is a current answer to a what is it question. The current answer is disrupted by new empirical evidence, and the role of the functional interpretation is to adjust the current heuristic or to develop a new one altogether. In the social sciences, as in theology, answers to this type of question tend to be woefully inadequate, usually in terms of how a word is used, a dictionary definition, or in terms of how a particular group use the word, or an imaginative framework which gathers together different aspects of the term. We go back to those images of the future that I spoke about earlier. Most, if not all of them, are imaginative projections of the future that take a perception of or feeling about the world now, usually one particular aspect, and project that forward. Again, let's think about the analogy of the sunflower seed that I spoke about earlier. Can we understand what a sunflower seed is without some grasp of its future possibilities as a fully grown, smiling sunflower? Now, is there not a parallel with humanity? How can we understand who we are without some grasp of our future possibilities, who we will become? A heuristic selects the relevant, significant, and essential elements in their relations that constitute humanity. It seeks to incorporate in some ways all the variations, all the possibilities into a single viewpoint. It seeks to be a universal viewpoint from which the data can be understood. It will relate in an integrated, holistic way all the dimensions of humanity: physical, chemical, biological, psychological, technological, economic, political, cultural, religious, personal and religious, not just one or other of these dimensions. As such, it is a guide to understand what is actually happening in any particular society, culture and religion at any point in time and in any place, both now and in the past. In this way, functional interpretation sets the conditions for the functional specialty history. Throughout the world, there are many different societies, cultures and religions. Each has a different history. Each has developed in its own way. Each is informed by its own set of values that are realized through its institutions, the taken for granted ways of meeting needs. But what values are vectors of ongoing change in the society, culture, or religion? The functional specialty interpretation provides an integrated holistic heuristic from which the functional specialty history can identify the particular set of values at different points in time in order to work out what values are the vectors of ongoing change. These values are usually taken for granted and are deeply embedded. They are the actually operative presuppositions about who we are and who we want to become. They are the worldview, the horizon within which a society, a culture, and a religion changes. By identifying those values that are the vectors of ongoing change, the functional specialty history sets the conditions for the functional specialty dialectic. The values that are the vectors of ongoing change differ between societies, cultures, and religions, but identifying them is not enough if we want to plot a way forward. These vectors are the horizon within which our decisions and actions take place. The functional specialty dialectic is about stopping and reflecting upon those vectors. It is about retracing our steps, coming to terms with what we have done, and assess what we have achieved. It is only by retreating to our base that we can fully understand the nature of our journey, that we can see it all in its consequentiality. For the most part, we are largely unaware of the presuppositions of our society, culture, and religion. It's only when confronted by other societies, cultures, and religions that we are challenged at our very roots. The functional specialty dialectic assembles the vectors of many different societies, cultures, and religions. It appreciates and critiques each. The functional specialty dialectic seeks to work out which vectors are worthwhile and promotes social, cultural, and religious development by showing they proceed from authentic subjectivity, from a process of learning and coming to know through experiencing, understanding, and judging, from a process choosing what is worthwhile, and from a process seeking to become fully alive as being in love. The functional specialty dialectic discovers and integrates the best of these vectors from our collective past. This becomes a guide to the future and sets the conditions for the functional specialty foundations. We can make discoveries about our past. Through the functional specialty dialectic, we can discover what is worthwhile and what is not. Discovery is one thing. Deciding to live by that discovery is another. The functional specialty dialectic sets the conditions for deciding to live in another way, to transform one's horizon. Decision changes us by introducing into our horizon, into our understanding of ourselves and who we aspire to be, that discovery. That's something new. Lonergan speaks of conversion, intellectual, moral, and religious. We can discover the way in which we come to know, the way in which we realize what is good and worthwhile, and that we are being in love. In short, the way in which we go beyond who we are. But it is only through a decision to live according to these discoveries that our lives will be transformed. There is, however, the residual, the habits of how we used to live, the values that still continue to inform our living. The existential gap, as Lonergan calls it. Ongoing transformation requires further discoveries about our lives, gaps between who we aspire to be and what we continue to do. And so further decisions to live according to those discoveries. The functional specialties foundations provide the horizon within which we aspire to live. But this raises a question as to how concretely we are to live and give expression to our decision to live in a new way. The functional specialties policies are about values. Values are what is intended in questions for deliberation. It is what we intend to bring about. It is future-oriented. Policies are about future direction. Where the functional specialties research, interpretation, history, and dialectic are about understanding and evaluating the values that were previously intended and have already been realized, the functional specialty policies is future-oriented. It is about setting new directions, new vectors, new values, ones that will best promote the development of humanity into our future. The functional specialties policies sets the directions, but leaves open the question as to what courses of action will achieve this. Thus, the functional specialties sets the conditions for the functional specialties systematics. It is not enough to aspire to become someone different and live in a new way. It is not enough to decide on new directions or new vectors. We have to work out how, within the complex series of contexts that constitute our humanity, technological, economic, political, cultural, and religious contexts, what course of action will integrate the new direction, this value, this vector. A decision to aspire to a new vision of humanity, to set some new direction, to work out a new course of action, then raises questions as to what practices, activities in this time and place will achieve the strategic course of action which will realise a new actual operative future for humanity. This sets the conditions for the implementation of something new. But once implemented, we now have a new set of data that sets the conditions for the functional specialties research.
2 minutes, Sean.
Functional collaboration is a scheme of recurrence that continues to recycle a cultural past as a guide to the future. In his book, Futurology Express, Philip McShane describes futurology as, quote, the conception, affirmation, and effecting of the integral heuristic structure of history. Futurology is caring as best we can, for the pup, the shoot called history, unquote. So you notice the paraphrase of Lonergan there. Functional collaboration is futurology. It is the best technology for plotting our way forward. Functional collaboration is a scheme of recurrence that aligns science with emergent probability as world process. It links theory and practice. It builds on our understanding of the past, the lessons we have learned, the best of the past to work out who we are, what to do, and how best express that. Functional collaboration is dynamic rather than static. It does not understand the past for the sake of understanding. It is always leaning forward into the future. That's it.
Thank you, Sean.